Alright, here we go with some gameplay from the new update. And we're going to try testing out the new difficulty features. First off, we're going to play a random pack game in hard mode. And then I'm going to switch to super hard mode after this. And we'll get a bit of a comparison between the two. So if you're not aware, previously the way the difficulty in the game worked was completely out with the player's control. Maybe I shouldn't say completely. You could pick to play easy mode, but if you did so, you weren't able to earn achievements. Easy mode basically just gave you extra lives. You could also choose to play hard mode, which was the same as normal mode, I think, except for you would have to choose a penalty toy every couple of turns, which would make things harder. Now things are a bit more complicated, and unfortunately some of the names of the difficulty modes have been reused, which makes it even harder to follow. So do bear with me here as I try to explain them. So now we have 4 difficulty modes. The lowest one is called normal. So this, in theory, should be even easier than the previous easy mode. Because now you are able to play against people who were previously in a lower matchmaking bracket. So the bracket system doesn't exist anymore. That means technically anyone can get matched with anyone else. Although whether or not in practice that happens, I'm not entirely sure. Do let me know in the comments, your own experiences so far with the difficulty settings. Are you seeing a lot of people you didn't see previously? Or are you finding it too difficult, too easy? Let me know. So yeah, previously if you were a brand new player, you would not be able to get matched with me or anyone else who had been playing the game for a long time. Which does make sense, Generally speaking, I think this game is quite difficult for beginners. So it doesn't make sense to have beginners just get crushed by playing against experienced opponents. And so they were kind of in their own walled garden. Now, we didn't really know how long it would take for someone to get out of that walled garden. Plenty of speculation over the years, and honestly, I still don't know. But now that isn't relevant anymore because that system is gone. And that means that you basically opt in to which difficulty level you want to play. So even if you've been playing for a long time like I have, I can just go in and select normal mode and play an extremely easy game where I'm basically guaranteed to win if I play normally. So the next mode up from that is called hard mode. Now this one, although it's called hard mode, there are no hard mode toys. So that's what we're playing in the game that's running in the background here. And this is kind of a strange mode because I feel like in some aspects it's harder and in others it's easier. So I think in general, if you were playing normally, as in playing to win, if you're an experienced player, you would generally expect to win the vast majority of the time when you play hard mode. However, if you don't play normally, as we unfortunately lose here because the Goblin Shark spits out the 1 HP alpaca, if you don't play normally, and you try and play a bit more unorthodox, generally the kind of stuff you would see me doing in various videos, you're going to have a much harder time of it because the early game, I think, is much harder. In the sense that you're not getting to play against people who are playing, who have had really bad starts. It's always picking someone who has had a decent start. Equally, you're unlikely to face people who are, going for draw scams. You're not going to face people who are playing random packs since they're probably going to be having a bad time as well. Actually, shout out to Freepik here because this is a very funny team that just gets absolutely demolished by my random team. But a very fun concept all the same. Yeah, and circling back to the difficulty level, I think that is kind of a big downside to this change at the moment. Of course, this is only version 1, so we don't know how long it might be before we get some adjustments to this. But at the moment, yeah, I feel like you're really punished for not just trying to play to win. Especially if your game goes past turn 12, 13. So here in this random game on turn 13, we face someone going for the Nordic Goats achievement with the level 3 hatching chick bison, and it's a pretty easy win. However, if the game had gone on a bit longer than that, I feel like my team would have just fallen apart completely. So now we'll move on to super hard mode. I will keep talking about hard mode in a second, but yeah, super hard. I'm not sure there's too much you can tell different in the early turns, but things start to get out of control pretty quickly, I would say. And I do wonder whether or not this difficulty mode needs the most adjustment of all of them. Yeah, the one thing I have noticed already is the ridiculous number of opposing teams that have Nudibranch, which you'd think would be a fairly uncommon pet because it's a mini-pack pet. But now it is, because it's such a good early game unit, if the teams that you're being shown are based on how strong the team is, it's going to show up a lot of the time. And now it could just be complete fluke that I'm getting these opponents, I don't know. It's always very difficult to tell. But my feeling would be that certain pets are now appearing more frequently simply because they win more games, both early and late. And the result of that has been that I feel like the variety has actually gone down rather than up, which is a bit of a shame. But it's early days. I'm going to keep playing and seeing if I can notice any more patterns. I have already sent feedback to the developers, and I'm sure they're getting feedback from other places as well. Because this is quite a big change. You know, it has been a long time since the matchmaking was significantly changed. So it's perfectly sensible that there would be some teething problems. So yeah, circling back to hard mode, I feel like hard mode is probably what I'm supposed to be playing if I'm trying to record gameplay for YouTube. But I think in practice, it's too hard to start the game off with when you get a bad start. And oftentimes when you're going for odd teams, you're deliberately taking a bad start in order to get, to find specific units that you need for your team, or to try and get worse opponents on purpose to keep yourself alive until such time as your team gets online. And that just doesn't really work in this setting where you're not really facing any bad teams. That's not to say that you can't face a bad team. It is definitely possible. And I have faced some teams that do look like they are not supposed to be in hard or super hard mode. I'm not sure exactly how that would happen, but there's been games where I've played against the full team of 30-30s, and then the next turn I played someone who is clearly a beginner. So there's definitely some oddities out there. Maybe that's just always going to be the case with a game like this where there's such a high degree of randomness involved. I don't know. But anyway, here in this super hard run, as you can see so far, it doesn't look all that different. And, we're basically just getting by with Big Gecko plus Toy. And then I end up rolling Sparrow with Strawberry. So I decided to take that. Both of these are units that I would rarely ever take in customs. Gecko, almost never, and Sparrow I very rarely take as well. Usually because most of the Strawberry teams I play involve using the strawberries up. And so Sparrow isn't necessarily the best in those situations. But we also have Pacific Fanfish here, which is another one I almost never take. And since we already had the level 3 Gecko, and we're getting close to the level 3 Bat guy, whose name I've forgotten. What is it? Monkey-faced Bat. We might as well keep that on the team. Actually, there I made a mistake. I rolled past the 1 gold strawberry. But this time I do freeze it. And yeah, I think a lot of stuff feels very, very similar. Like, look at this opposing team here. So units that you would see all the time in customs previously. So Skunk, Nyala, Whale. It is a tie in the end, but I'm not seeing any teams that are particularly unusual, I would say, at this point. Maybe that's to be expected. I'm not sure, really. All of this is kind of just like trial and error. What would you expect to see in a super hard difficulty mode? Honestly, I think I would expect to see a lot of busted summon teams. But mostly, I'm just seeing scaling. Certainly, once we get once we get into the double-digit turns. So we're now on turn 11, and generally this was the case in old customs as well. That you would get to the double-digit turns, and then the teams would start getting stronger, quote unquote. Although a lot of the time the teams weren't necessarily stronger; they were just bigger, and they would have more stats across the board, and generally they would have pets like Leopard or Warthog and so on, the ones that benefit from, their attack increased, or just their stats in general increased. Now here, this is a relatively weak looking team for turn 11, so we're in super hard mode, but that person was obviously free to play. Or if they're not free to play, then they were playing only free to play units. So that's a strange one. Like, why would that team be in super hard difficulty? I don't know. But I'm freezing the chickpeas here because ultimately I want to try and transform the monkey face bat. Because now that I've gone to having strawberries on everything, the chances of pets behind taking getting damaged and therefore triggering the bat's ability is very low. And actually, the great one doesn't do any damage either. It just removes some of the hits from the strawberry. But luckily here we scrape the win. Also see a fair few shark summon teams. At least that's what I've seen so far. And then here I decide to actually use the chickpea on the gecko because the toy ran out. And then I give up on the other chickpea, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to come back to it. Mushroom doesn't really help us. There we go, we get the upgrade on the Sparrow. And yeah, this is obviously a team that at this stage in the game, you're really only going to beat opponents like this, where they have some kind of synergy, but they don't have huge units that are just going to power through the strawberry, which is blocking the damage. Luckily here, the rabbit doesn't get to hit anything important since we were already down to almost... I think we're already down to very low health there. And we get the level 3 sea cucumber. But look at this team now. So compare this team with the teams from the 2 turns previously. This is nonsense, really. Double T-Rex, double level 2 T-Rex and monkey on turn 14. 50-50 monkey. And I've cut it out, but I actually went and spectated that team just to try and find out which difficulty mode they were playing. And sure enough, it was normal mode, which is basically easy mode. And I think that is definitely a major problem with this system, is that you can now go into normal mode, create a powerful team by playing against very easy opponents, and then your team is going to be used for matchmaking in the higher difficulty brackets. Now this opponent looks like free to play. Again, it's massive scaling across the board, and I'm not really surprised because, people are going to keep playing these massive scaling teams if they feel like that's the only way they can survive into the late game. And we freeze up the Sparrow, and it would have been nice to get it this turn. But then the final opponent is your Commoner Garden Owl Gold Bird of Paradise spam team. So probably the most common type of team that you would face on turn 16 in the old customs as well. But of course, I'm not getting to face them when they're in that weak and vulnerable state where they're risking everything getting their buy-sell engine online. You're not getting to face the teams that are taking risks until such time as the risks have paid off.